We too will be opposing this proposal, and not for any of the similar reasons of anything that was mentioned here tonight, and I reject the idea that this is all about our sovereignty. I want to start from the point of view of looking at why we have this pact in the first place. It has been said repeatedly by backbenchers on the government side that we need a fair, firm, efficient and enforced process for dealing with the asylum seekers crisis. Now, everybody has acknowledged that there is a crisis. Some have described it as a European problem. This is a global problem. There are more people moving across the planet today seeking safety and refuge from famine, from drought, from climate change, from conflict, from persecution than ever there was since the Second World War. And in the Second World War, those who moved were the Jews, because they were being subjected to the final solution by Hitler and the Nazi Party. I'm reading a very interesting book at the moment, IBM and the Holocaust. And in this they show and prove that Hitler would not have been able to carry out the final solution without the cooperation of major corporations like IBM, Siemens, Krupp, etc. But the role that were played by these corporations was absolutely disgraceful. And if we were to wind back the clock, when you read about the torture and the persecution and the absolute brutality of the final solution and why populations were moving, if we were to wind back the clock and be in our shoes now in the 1940s, would we be talking about controlling the movement of migrants, or would we be opening our arms and sitting down and starting from the point of view of saying, what can we do to help them? What can we do to make life better? How can we deal with this absolutely inhumane catastrophe in a humane way? But the starting point of the European Union, led by Ursula von der Leyen and the other leaders of countries like Belgium and France, who are responsible for colonial outpouring of civil war in the countries that they occupied in Africa, their starting point is to say, oh my God, this is an awful problem. Even though in fact the European Union takes about 24% or has about 24% of the total global migrant population coming onto its shores, and of that 24%, at its height we had 1%, which was in 2023. And there's this moral panic about the migrants that are moving and how do we deal with this problem, this European problem it's been repeatedly called. This is absolutely a challenge. And it's absolutely a challenge that's been created by human activity that has led to climate change, war and persecution. And it's a challenge to deal with it. But it's not the starting point. Seeing human beings as an absolute problem is what leads you to a pact of this nature. And nobody has discussed what else is in this pact, which we're not opting into, I acknowledge, but the fact that we're trying to opt into any of it is outrageous, because another part of this pact is about funding what they call safe third countries. The first safe third country that we identify here is Libya. And we have been pouring, as European Union members, we have been pouring millions, probably at this stage billions, into Libya to keep migrants from crossing the Mediterranean, store them there, put them into these detention centres there, and subject them to what has been proven by Sally Hayden and others who have documented it and visited these areas, are slave camps, where there's rape, where there's torture, where people, human beings, are bought and sold and killed, and they're migrants who are fleeing famine, war, persecution, etc., etc., right? So the European Union's cynicism to say we now extend the safe countries to include Egypt, Tunisia, Albania, you name it. Look for any despotic regime and give them millions to hold on to migrants so that we in the European Union don't have to deal with it. One of the richest parts of the planet, and we don't want to deal with human beings who are desperate. What we want to do is keep them back and curtail them. That's the cynicism of this pact. And the fact that we're signing into any of it or attempting to opt into any of it is disgraceful. We should be standing up loud and proud and rejecting the approach of the European Union. And I don't have all the solutions, and I'm not standing here to say, to be a goody two-shoes and say, here's a solution that I can come up with. But surely to God, if you have all this bureaucracy of the EU, of the various countries who are members of it, you could look at the overall state of the Union. The union's workers in the union are increasingly ageing. We need a younger population. This country needs more workers. Everybody has said it. We're short of bus drivers, we're short of mechanics, we're short of teachers, we're short of doctors, we're short of nurses, and yet we're rejecting the potential to increase our workforce. And I say we're rejecting it because that's the starting point. The starting point is it is a problem, not that this is an opportunity and indeed a challenge. And the reason I think that we're starting from there is because the way the world is run, it's all about where does the profit go and who makes the most money, just as it was when Hitler used the IBM company to design a computer system that would help him carry out the final solution of the annihilation of 6 million Jews. It's the same basis on which we were organised then that we're organised now, which leads us to say that human beings are a problem rather than an opportunity and something that we need to recognise as having the potential to make the world a better place for everybody, including themselves. And I want to challenge something Minister Karen McNeill said there. She said Europe has to maintain the rule of law, and maintaining the rule of law we need to look at how migrants are treated. Well, there was a BBC report done on what happens on Greek soil with the Greek Coast Guard, and they interviewed a series of different people who were trying to escape from the countries they came from, countries like the Cameroon, Somalia, Sudan, etc. And it's chilling, the accounts that they gave. And here's one of them. One asylum seeker said, and I quote, "We barely docked and the police came from behind. 2 policemen dressed in black and 3 others in civilian clothes. They were masked, you could only see their eyes. They took a man from Cameroon and another from the Ivory Coast, and they transferred him onto a Coast Guard boat. And then they threw the Cameroonian man into the water. And the Ivorian man said, 'Please save me, I don't want to die.' They then threw him in the water, and as they watched his body go below, his hand was up saying, in other words, 'Please save me.' And they just watched and watched while his hand slipped down and the man was drowned." And another witness talked about the Greek Coast Guard punching migrants in the head till they almost killed them. And then, of course, we had the episode of the Greek Coast Guard allowing 923 people to die, 600 people to die, and 923 total expected during that period. Where have the Greek government been taken to court by the EU over breaking the law? They haven't. And the Minister also mentioned what goes on in Belarus and the dumping of refugees over the border. And she's right, and there's a film on next week about that called Green Borders. It's won prizes. And they dumped them over the border into Poland, literally throw their bodies, and these were Syrian refugees, over the barbed wire into Poland. And then what do the Polish guards do? They pick them up and throw them right back. And where has the Polish government ever been taken to an EU court if the EU rule of law is so important? It's hypocrisy, it's nonsense. And now we have more and more Palestinians trying to escape the situation in Gaza, which is contributed hugely by EU, particularly since Germany and the EU helped to arm the Israeli government. And as Palestinians flee that and come here, we're saying, oh, we have to doubt you, question you, fast-track your applications, let's look twice at what's going on here. I think the whole starting point of the EU Asylum and Migration Pact is one of cruelty. It is not one of humanity and is not one of opportunity. And it refuses to recognise the wealth in this continent compared to the continents from which these people come. It refuses to recognise the opportunities that are there. And in this country, what we have refused to recognise is that all of the services that we lack, whether it's the fact that we have only 7 GPs for every 10,000 people when we should have 12 GPs for every 10,000 people, whether it's the fact that we've 4,000 more people in homeless accommodation and 100,000 people on waiting lists, whether it's the fact that our health service is in crisis, we have refused to recognise that that is the fault of consecutive Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael-led governments, particularly since austerity that was imposed on us by the EU after the 2008 bank crash. If we recognise that as a starting point, we would not be blaming communities and we would not be blaming migrants. We would be saying the fault lies with those who have run this government, who allowed the bank bailout to cripple us, who also allowed the bank bailout to cripple Greece, by the way, and then when the migrants start looking for help and safety, they become the problem. Well, I think we should start again and look at them not as a problem, as a challenge, yes, but as an opportunity to make this world a better place. And that is what is the real fundamental problem with the Migration Pact, is that it sees everything in terms of human beings as a problem. And that's why we need to reject it.
Margaret.